Okay. So we're gonna just chat briefly about self-inquiry in general. Um, Claire, can you maybe kick us off with some examples of when you as a provider might be thinking of like, ooh, this could be a good moment for self-inquiry for my client?
Yes. So many opportunities of good self inquiry teaching or moments. And in general, I think that, we talk about food noise with our clients and how kind of like rating the food noise and what that looks like for them. And they could probably tell you that it's at like a 90% or 100% of the time, right? And so those little moments of their day when they are extensively thinking about food, whether it be like planning out what they're going to have at a certain time and having those rigid rules. When rules come about and they are thinking about breaking them and it, creates more food noise, that's idiosyncratic energy. So
Nice.
like a client that is feels a hunger pain because they're sitting there and it's about time to have lunch, but it's not exactly that time that they have in their mind. It's time for lunch. That very quickly turns into idiosyncratic energy for them. Or they are invited to go somewhere after work, but that's not part of their plan and they, are not comfortable with maybe eating in front of people and it starts to ramp up some food noise. I think that like those are all opportunities to teach this skill, and to help our clients like identify that it's those moments are not really normal.
Yeah.
To be, to have this like heightened energy and how they're thinking about their day and how they're thinking and their, mind completely goes to this like tense moment and panic. Teaching them that is a place for a little bit of learning.
Nice. Yes. Okay. I like what you're saying because really the first step when anyone does self-inquiry is to ask themselves, like, what brought me energy today? And probably for most of our clients, they feel a lot of energy all throughout the day about food stuff, but also maybe about body image stuff or maybe about their exercise routine that just got messed up. And so
Mhm.
there's so many moments where they could practice self-inquiry. Because like what you said, that idiosyncratic energy meaning, and maybe we should describe what that means. It's kind of like atypical energy, or like most people would not respond in the way that you responded. Um, and so yeah, I hope this gives people lots of ideas of when they could potentially introduce self-inquiry to a client and the dialectic of that I just want to throw out there. Like, you don't have to have a moment in your session to be like, oh, this is it. Like, I need to teach self-inquiry right now. You could potentially just be like, hey, I have this really useful skill called self-inquiry. You mind if we spent maybe 5 minutes in me teaching you about it? And then you can decide for yourself if it would be useful or where or when you would use it. That way, it could be throughout the course of your future sessions together, because it will come up often that self-inquiry would be useful. Um,
Yeah, and I think too, like going off of that, it can be oftentimes as a clinician you're wanting to jump to, oh, this person has a rule, let's go into, figuring out what that rule is and how that rule serves them and or whatever it may be. And I think that teaching self-inquiry is really helpful for you as a clinician too, because in future sessions, once your client understands the skill, you can be pretty quick to like just allow them to either do it in session or assign it for homework so you can move on to maybe one of your other agenda items that was more pertinent for the day, rather than spending all that time to just like, oh, let's break down that rule, or let's really talk like intricately about this. Like, allow them to kind of do that sort of work on that thought or that energy.
Love it. Yes, totally. Like I hope providers know that they could do self-inquiry in the session with their clients, and they can also just
Mm-hmm.
assign it as homework. Or you could just simply say like, oh, is that an edge for you? Or, that could be a good opportunity to do self-inquiry and just like leave it at that and move on with your session. So there's so many different ways you could smuggle self-inquiry into your sessions. And I guess any other thoughts, Claire, before I share what it would be like to introduce self-inquiry?
Only other thought I have is that, in my experience, once a client understands the skill and understands or has done it enough times on their own or like in session that it is pretty helpful for them. I have some clients that are like, I don't even have to say anything. They're like, oh, that's probably something I should do self inquiry on. And you're like, yeah, nice. Okay. So yeah.
I heard that. That was wild. And
I
you
love thunderstorms so much. Oh
Me
my
too.
God.
This is a great example. Everyone just saw like our response to thunder, and that could be a normal response, right? But
Mhm.
if it's atypical and it sends us into maybe a panic attack or something, then possibly a good time to do self-inquiry of like, what is it about thunder that makes me feel tremendous fear? I hope that's making sense for people that are viewing this. But
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna pretend like you are the client. I'm gonna pretend that we are fairly new to each other and that I think it's a good opportunity for me to teach you about self-inquiry. So,
Mhm.
I'm gonna call you Stacy, all right? Hey, Stacy. Um, I think right now would be a good time to potentially learn a new skill called self-inquiry. It's an RODBT skill. It's actually the core skill of RODBT. And I'm wondering if it would be all right with you if we spend about maybe 5 minutes reviewing it.
Sure.
Okay. So to start, know that I'm going to teach you this, and it will probably not make sense until you actually practice it. So this is a skill that you have to viscerally kind of experience for you to have an understanding of it. And your understanding will kind of change throughout time as you continue your practice. So I'll do my best to describe self-inquiry, and then I really want you to jump in. I want you to like try it out today, try it out tomorrow, and know that it will get better with time, your understanding. Does that part kind of make sense?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So I practice self-inquiry myself. Providers are encouraged to do this on a daily basis as well as clients. And so these are what I would call maybe the steps of self-inquiry. So step one is to kind of ask yourself, what brought me energy today? And when I say energy, I mean idiosyncratic energy or atypical energy, where like the general public would probably not respond in the same way that I responded, whether that's internal, like thoughts and emotions of how I responded, or like externally how I responded in my signaling. For example, I went to Starbucks and I asked them for light ice. And as I was driving away, they gave me not only a normal cup of ice, it was like a large cup of ice. And I was pissed. And I thought about the ice multiple times in my day. Like I just kept ruminating about the ice. So that's kind of like possibly some idiosyncratic, atypical energy, right? That's a good moment to do self-inquiry for me. Does that part make sense as far as like what brought me energy today and kind of thinking of an example?
Yeah, definitely. I could probably think of many.
Great, great. So the next step, and there's three kind of different ways to do self-inquiry, but for simplicity's sake today, I just want us to focus on kind of the journaling aspect of it. Do you have a sort of journal or like a Word document or something where you can maybe keep track of your practice?
I really like to use the Notes app in my phone. Would that work?
That would work. I've had clients even do audio recording where they could just like speak into the
Oh,
and that would be fine. Whatever.
okay. Yeah.
Okay. So the second step then is to start to record or journal about the experience. So for me, it could be like having this image of me driving away with this full cup of ice and going into like my experience. What was I feeling? What was my sensations like? What were my thoughts like? And instead of blaming the world or Starbucks, blaming other people, we actually in self-inquiry go inward and we ask ourselves, what is there for me to learn about myself in this situation with the ice? Because it can be kind of easy for over-controlled folks to maybe regulate our emotions or practice self-acceptance or blame other people or be in denial about a situation. But usually what's kind of hard for OC folks is to actually go towards the discomfort and essentially dysregulate. Um, so we're going to be kind of journaling or writing your notes in your notes section, things that kind of get you closer to that dysregulation or closer to what we call an edge. So this is kind of step three. So step three is like where an edge is like a personal unknown. It's like something that maybe I haven't really discovered about myself or uncovered in a long time. It's sometimes an uncomfortable place to be, or you might experience numbness. Usually it's, something that we learned about ourselves that we might not be super proud of. That's a part of us. It's kind of like our shadow side or our dark side. Sometimes we don't want other people to know that that's a part of us. And so if you get to this kind of uncomfortable place while you're journaling, you probably are doing really good self-inquiry. Like you're doing really good learning because you're uncovering parts of yourself that maybe doesn't fit your values, or maybe you uncovered a rule that you have about yourself and it's very uncomfortable to think about going opposite to that, and you end it there. So I'm seeing your face, I know. So kind of one of the last like steps is to know that this is a 5-minute exercise or less. Oftentimes I personally set a timer for 3 minutes. I'm trying to locate an edge or kind of this new place of learning for about myself, not about Starbucks or the world. And then once I get there, I'm done. Timer goes off. I move on with my day. And then what's cool with self-inquiry is you can kind of pick it up the next day where you ended and do another self-inquiry entry on where you left off the previous day if you want. But, a lot of times self-inquiry is asking questions of like, what is there for me to learn? Um, or, if my shadow side could speak, what would it say? Anything that will help you kind of locate that edge. And like I said, this is an experiential skill. So I encourage you to practice it this week, see what you kind of come up with. And then next week when we meet, I'm happy to like go over it with you again and see where you're at. But I guess right now, let me check in. What thoughts or questions do you have? And then we're gonna pause the scene there. Okay. So that's usually how I orient clients to self-inquiry. I will say sometimes in your sessions you will not have that long to teach, and sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it might be better to leave out some of the stuff I said just to help them get like a little concept of self-inquiry, but we really want to encourage them to just go in and try it. Be a little quick and reckless, not overthink it, not Google it, not try to figure it out to be perfect at it, which sometimes that could be an edge for people. Um, but know that you can obviously make this a little bit longer or a little bit shorter, and that's totally fine. Claire, would you add anything to that role play before we pause the recording? Or did I miss anything?
Um, I guess just in the teaching of it, but then if we were still going and you were like, "Oh, do you have any questions?" Um, the thing that came up for me was, I don't know if you clarified like how it's supposed to end,
Oh, yeah.
and that's always the question that people have is like, so you come up with an answer, right? Like people are always trying to like figure out an answer,
Yeah.
right? And so I know you say that in the beginning, but I think that like from what I've learned in describing and teaching self inquiry is like that's something that has to kind of come towards the end of like, okay, and by the way, you're going to stop at that 5 minutes and you're not going to be coming up. You're not trying to answer a question for yourself. You're trying to actually come up with a question for yourself oftentimes, or like come up with you're not trying to solve your problem
Nice. Such a
that
good.
you've come up with.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you for adding that. Right. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I think as a provider, you could say something like, you don't need to fix anything or solve any problems. You could oftentimes we end our self-inquiry with a question that brings you closest to your edge. That's probably the most uncomfortable question you could ask yourself.
Mhm.
Or it could potentially, sometimes for me and other people, it could be a statement that is like really bothersome or an image that you dislike usually. You can kind of
Mhm.
end your self-inquiry with that and then pick it up the next time if you want. But you're right, we're not solving anything or fixing anything. We're just getting curious with questions.
Yeah. And so like the practice of self inquiry is oftentimes doesn't just stop with one 3 minute session,
Yeah.
and it's like this continuous self discovery, right? Okay, yeah, that's all that I would add to that.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Mhm.
Pausing.